So the government has just announced that they will take action against those people who came out with this 99-1 scheme to reduce the impact of the ABSD to buy a second property. So basically, IRAS lai liao in a big way. Well, let's watch on and see what did they kena, and also more importantly, figure out what on earth is this 991 scheme, and more importantly, how much did each of them, got hit with a fine. The news has just came out, incidentally, by our future Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. The IRAS will claw back $60 million from property price buyers, okay, which use this scheme called 99-1 scheme to reduce the impact of ABSD. So this one is a tax avoidance arrangement, borderline illegal, borderline. I didn't say illegal, I said borderline, okay? That's why it's called tax avoidance and not tax xiaming, right? This one has been used by some property buyers to reduce the impact of the ABSD, which is the additional buyer stamp duty for the purchase of a residential property. For some of you all who are not Singaporeans and don't know, in Singapore, if you buy a second property under your name, you get a hit by a very, very, very high stamp duty. We call it the additional buyer stamp duty. I don't exactly know how much is it right now, but I think it's 15-20% or something like that. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But I think the main thing is that right now, there are people who are exploiting a loophole, and the government just plugged the loophole and retrospectively hunt down all these abusers. Let's watch on. So what on earth is this 991 arrangement the government is talking about? To understand how the ABSD work, we first have to understand this figuratively, right? With a picture, it's easier that way. So let's start with a person A. Person A has no property at all, okay? So when he buys a property, he just paid the normal stamp duty. He doesn't pay a single cent of the additional buyer stamp duty. So he now owns the house, but he sells 1% of the share to person B, okay? And person B buys 1% of the house, now owns a 1% house, but he only needs to pay the ABSD based on previous rules, 1% of $1 million at an additional buyer stamp duty rate of 20%. So he only pays $2,000 ABSD, okay? So this is person B. So person A doesn't pay ABSD, person B pays $2,000 ABSD, and I think you kind of could guess why the person do that already. So it is a two-step purchase process that enable person B who owns a house already now to own the second house by paying only 1% of the share of the ABSD, which is a somewhat ABSD xiaming process, right? Avoidance process. So where exactly is the tax avoidance? The tax avoidance is this. So person A has no existing property. Person B, okay, has another property. If they do a joint purchase, then, okay, the highest ABSD will apply to the entire value, okay, entire value of the ABSD, which is 20% of 1 million in this case, which is $200,000. So if it's a single purchase, he will have to pay $200,000 ABSD, which is phenomenal, right? But if you look at the previous case, okay, he now only pays $2,000, okay, by making a two-step process, and he owned only 1% of the property. Now, in these kind of cases, most of the case, person A and person B are family owners. That's why they can trust each other. If it's just two strangers, very unlikely. Now, this arrangement called the 99-1 process allow a lot of ABSD savings to people who has aspiration to own two or more property. So this is essentially a very smart way previously of avoiding ABSD at a big amount. But however, this is a loophole because the 991 shareholding from the start was aimed to cool down property. It's trying to make house owner pay much more if they buy a second property. But through this smart arrangement, okay, they only pay a very small amount of ABSD, and therefore this is actually a loophole because person B is probably the one who engineered this whole thing, but he cannot buy a house without paying full ABSD because he already own the house. So he looks for person A who has got no house, probably a family owner, and he used his name or her name to buy the house, but person B is the one that pays for the house in some, or rather most of the house in this extent. So through this very creative way, person B actually owns the property, which I thought it's very creative way of doing it. But you know what? You are smart. I think the government is smarter. So what did the government do to these people? So right now, the government has already announced if the IRAS found out that the tax avoidance has happened, they will recover the rightful amount of stamp duties from these buyers. I don't care whether you pay you only own 1% or 50% or 20%. I will whack you, okay, the entire amount of stamp duty. And on top of that, may impose a 50% surcharge of the stamp duty payable. So if the kena is a big amount, right? Nowadays, very few condominiums are 1 million anymore. Most of them are 1.5, 2, maybe 2.5, whatever, right? Big amount, right? So this amount is very big, and later we shall see how big this amount is. So if you are late with paying this stamp duty, the penalty can go up to 4 times the amount. So I think these people right now are really very worried. So how much will be clawback? And the government has actually announced it. The total amount to clawback is $60 million. $60 million. Someone said, so $60 million is how much? So there are 166 cases. So you take $60 million divided by 160 cases, that's $360,000 per case. I think this is a very, very big amount. I suspect that some of these people won't be able to afford to pay this 360,000, and I think they'll be in a rush to sell the house or something like that. So there'll be potentially, quite a lot of people are in the tight fix right now. So they kena very, very JiaLat, right? Very, very JiaLat. 360,000 per case. And if you are hit with a 50% surcharge, okay, that's I don't know whether this $60 million include the surcharge, but if it doesn't, that's almost $500,000 per case. $500,000. I don't know how many people have $500,000 spare cash sitting there doing nothing, waiting for to pay the fine. So this is a huge impact on this ABSD scammers, right? I don't know whether they allow them to sell their house and ask for a reprieve and things like that. IRAS traditionally, if you need time, they give you time to pay back. But I'm not too sure whether this case they will allow them, because it did say that if you are late, they will ask you to pay 4 times, up to 4 times. That's 4 times 3.6. That's 1.3 or $1.4 million. That's a hell of money. So I think many people will be in trouble because of this case. So what's the lesson learned from this, right? Lesson learned, I'm not gloating over this. Let just be very clear. I'm not gloating over this thing. I'm actually trying to give a lesson on this thing. Number one, I came to realize recently that government loopholes have no longevity. Means that you won't see, if there's a loophole, it won't be forever. Okay. The government will eventually find out, because everybody will start talking about it. CPF SA shielding was one. ABSD 99 was one. I'm in opinion, decoupling, it will be the next one that might kena from the government. Okay. And by the way, for those people who don't understand what kena is, means you get slammed or hit by the government. So I think that loopholes, government loopholes, policy loopholes will not last forever in Singapore. The government will eventually find out, pass the law, and hit you back, okay? Clawback and things like that. Luckily, in the case of SA shielding, they didn't do that. But in the case of ABSD, where they went hard on these guys, right? Bottom line is, if you see a loophole, government loophole, don't try to take advantage of it. You might get into trouble. This is a good lesson for all of us on discovering loopholes and thinking are very smart. So especially for Singapore property, where it is a very sensitive topic to the government, where there are higher policies involved, that they try to reduce the demand for private property, they will be doubly sensitive to people who exploit the loopholes that enables them to take advantage of this. So as I said, now let's watch and see whether the next one will be decoupling. I think that sooner or later, the government will take an action on it, depending on how many people take advantage of it. And it's also worth noting that the people involved, the 166 people involved, as a fraction of the total of people buying houses, is actually very small. So some people say, oh, Mr. Loo, when the fraction is very small, the government don't care. Utter rubbish, right? Utter rubbish. So 166 people still get it from the government, okay? As a percentage, it must be 0 point something%, I don't know, right? They still get hit, okay? Let alone decoupling, which I think is a much bigger scale right now. Let's watch and see whether the government will retrospectively do something about decoupling as well. I'm not encouraging or discouraging people to do anything, okay? I'm just analyzing this thing and maybe guessing where the government next move may be, okay? So with this, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in a day or two. Bye-bye.